Alrighty, welcome back to the big show. Jamel Hartman here. It's the Daily Hour brought to you by the BAC Group of Companies, Medical House Lindos, and People's Pharmacy. Don't forget to subscribe on our website. Follow us on all of our social media channels to stay up to date with all that we have going on. Help us grow beyond the mic as we do our part to continue to improve our community. All right, without further ado, let's bring in a very special guest today. We're just want to let everyone know. So we're going to be doing some regular conversations with scars in a way to engage our community, to help our community to better serve our children, to better protect our children. And these conversations are probably brought to you by the QBE Foundation. So let's give a warm TDH welcome to very special guest, Debi Ray-Rivers. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How are you?
Hi, Jamel. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me and Scars to talk about the vital importance of making sure the children of Bermuda are protected from sexual.
Of course. Thank you for doing this. So before we even get into the importance of what we're discussing today, I've got to ask you: were you a math person in school?
Absolutely not.
Okay, we're aligned. We're aligned. No disrespect to the math wizards. I appreciate you. I value you. I love you. But I just numbers and I just we're not aligned. So we're in the same boat.
Yeah, we sure are. No, I was definitely not good at math. I wasn't good at many things, actually. Maybe English and psychology, but that's about it.
Yeah. And you know what? It just goes to show we're not going to be good at everything, but what we do focus on and where we lend our heart to, we can definitely make a difference. And that you have. And before we get into the conversation, Kenton Trott says SCARS is one of the organizations that is doing the real work to protect our children. Good morning, Debbie. Says Kenton. But let's just go back because you've been on the show before, but just for if this is someone's first time tuning in, let's just go back a bit. And Debbie, just share your story about where the idea came to create SCARS when you did.
Yeah, thank you. The idea came from pain, actually. My family was affected by this issue of child sexual abuse back in 2004. My girls were sexually molested they were 9 and 10 when a 78-year-old man used their little bodies to gain sexual pleasure. He was a family member, a very trusted, close family member. And so that's where it all began. There were, the country was not where it is today. There was, there's a lot of shame around child sexual abuse. And so it was a very silent issue. People would use terms like, stay away from him because he interferes with children instead of sexually abused children. We were kind of, not glossing it over, but not really calling it what it is and calling people out for what they did to children. There were, we have a lot of survivors in our country and people were sharing their story with me, but it was just super taboo. It's not that we've changed that, the shame around it, that we still have a stigma around child sexual abuse, but I think we've come a long way. But my family was affected. It was shocking for me. There were things that I also didn't do as a parent. I didn't have enough conversations with my children about body safety and boundaries and consent. I didn't speak to the adults in my life to say, hey, listen, I'm educated in prevention. Never let me find out you've ever done anything sexual to my children. I wish I would have said that at a Sunday dinner. I had done I had taken part in some education and I know now about this topic. I didn't put him on notice because I had no idea that this person was doing this to my children. We trust family members. We trust the adults in our children's life and we assume that our children are going to be safe. Well, my kids were not safe. And it rocked our family. He was also a very, he carried a Bible. So he was a devout church member. So that was also a huge shock for us. Like, it's when we realize even people in our life who we know and trust can harm children, people that are related to us, people that claim to be Christians. and know anything about a Bible, because they don't, in my personal view.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just rocked our family, Jamel. It rocked my world as a mom. It was the worst day of my life to discover that this had happened. And that's kind of started this whole thing. There was a lot of denial, a lot of minimization, wanting me to keep it quiet, just take care of my kids and move on. And I knew that doesn't change things. Like we have to advocate for change, because I knew in my heart that it was just wrong. And and there were a lot of things that happened back in 2004 and 2005 and 2006 that I knew needed to change. And I was determined to, first of all, get educated in what I could have done to prevent it,
Well,
and to make change.
yeah, and speaking of that, and Debbie, again, this almost goes back to our story this morning. This is not to shame anyone. This is not to shame anyone, what I'm saying, but you just mentioned that people probably wanted you to stay quiet, not go, and had you remained quiet and just kept it within your family, we wouldn't have what we have today. And one of the biggest things that I hear people speaking about is the education that SCARS is providing. So how have you utilized this organization to go about educating the community on how to better protect children?
Yeah. So what you have to do is just change attitudes and behaviors. So a year before I started SCARS, I found this educational curriculum that was developed in the United States by an organization called the Darkness to Light organization. And they provide curriculums around prevention, because in order to stop something, you got to educate people. Because I could have gone and protested all I wanted, but nobody was going to listen to me. I was unknown. What did I know? I was just a very upset, angry, and determined mom. But in order to change attitudes and behaviors, prevention education is what worked. And so the first thing I did was find this educational curriculum, and then brought it back to Bermuda. And together with John Brunson, who is a past chairman of SCARS, we hit the road running, and we became a charity in 2011, and we started educating our community in May 2012. And we could see, I don't know if you've ever heard of this theory, I'm sure you have, Jamel, called the tipping point theory, where if you can affect 5% of a given population on a certain behavior or societal problem, you can start changing behaviors around that. And that tipping point, which I think was developed by Gladwell, I've forgotten his name, sorry. Anyway, it'll come to me. The theory is, if you can affect 5% of a given population on a certain societal issue, you can start changing behaviors and attitudes. And we saw that. Once we trained 5% of our adult population, we started seeing things change. The more and more people that came into our room to be educated on prevention, what they can do to reduce the risk of kids being sexually harmed, started to change, where more and more people were getting trained. Organizations were mandating the people who serve their children to be provided with this education, so that they can start recognizing some signs. We didn't understand this issue. So we didn't have the knowledge to know what are some signs that might indicate a child's being harmed. Yeah. What are those signs? And a change of behavior? Are they angry? Are they in drugs? Are they depressed? Or do they suddenly don't want to be around this relative anymore? There were signs that I wish I would have picked up on, because one of my daughters was abused for 4 years at his hands. If I would have been educated in prevention, I would have picked up some of those signs.
So what can like a parent or guardian, like, parents right now, just using some of the language that was used from comments earlier, is people are working so many jobs. They have their children in so many different activities. They may not even think that something like, again, no one wants to think this. They don't know what's going on, but what can they do, like the busy guardian parent, do to better protect their children in those instances?
Okay. Let me just, while it came to me, Malcolm Gladwell is the guy who.
Yes. I
wanted to say that. So the first thing that I would say to parents, and yes, parents are busy, get educated in prevention. Sign up for a SCARS training. It's 3 hours and it's free, thanks to our donors and our community and corporate donors. They provide the funds to SCARS. We provide the funds to Darkness to Light to pay for every participant that comes in our room. So it's free education. Get educated on what you can do to recognize the signs, learn the facts about it, how to talk to your children about this issue, and how to minimize the opportunity for this to happen, what questions you need to ask organizations before you just drop your child off to a school, to a camp, to a club, to a faith-based center. Ask some questions of that organization. Listen, our children are our treasures, and we as parents and guardians and caregivers have every right to ask organizations some questions. We don't know everybody working in these organizations. Perpetrators want to be where there are children. So the organizations who open their doors to children, they have an obligation to make sure they're doing everything they can to protect the children that they're responsible for. And guess what? Organizations in Bermuda are doing that. We have more and more youth serving organizations coming into our rooms. So the parents, I believe, also, obviously have been putting some pressure on these organizations to say, what prevention education do you offer? What does your social media policy look like? What happens if my child reports to you that they've been abused? What are you doing? What are your transportation? You got to take my kid home. What does that look like? And to keep my child safe. Parents have a right to do that. But prevention also begins at home, Jamel. So it's our duty as parents to talk to our kids about body safety, about boundaries, and do that in an age-appropriate, child-friendly way. It does start at home. And, sex was such a uncomfortable word, years ago, Jamel. Like, a penis wasn't called a penis. It was called your boy, your Willie, your Johnson. We give it a different name. We don't have another. I always say we don't have another name for our nose. We got to the private part, so we created this shame-based knowledge of parts of the body that are very special, but also very private. So we want our, but not just a one-time conversation. We want our parents and guardians to start early talking to their children about this and talk often. So parents, busy parents, first start with getting yourself educated. 3 hours out of your life to hear about a very important topic on child safety, to keep your child safe. The best protection is you as a parent, but I know you're busy. Keep those conversations open. Let your child know that they can tell you anything about anyone that makes them feel uncomfortable, even if it's Uncle Johnny, even if it's you as a parent or a guardian that might cross their space of something that makes them feel uncomfortable. We should be okay with that. Let our children know. Let me know. Your body belongs to you.
It's interesting because I actually said to my niece during the holidays, I said, I had a chat with her about it because, at a school, there was something that happened with a teacher that was in the news. I said, if anything happens, you let your mommy know. I didn't say let uncle know. I said, you tell your mother everything. She said, okay. But I say that because of what you just said. I think one of the things that I've read in the news is I think people fail to realize, and I think you may have said it before on something I've seen, is that a lot of it is from people close to you, right? And so the way children are raised is, we're not supposed to. And that's why I like the parenting, this new thing of parenting is not forcing children to hug someone or even speak to someone, right? I don't before it was like, oh no, that's your uncle, go hug, give him a hug. And so, no. So even things like that I've noticed have changed, which I think is part of the education that SCARS is doing. Because you've done and I'm not saying this just because you're here, but you've done a wonderful job in making sure, like I hear people say, oh, well, are they SCARS trained? Like people, whether it's coaching certain organizations, I give you that. It's a lot. But I want to go to the audience because we do have quite a few questions. They love you, Debbie. What can I say? We've got Charles H. Jeffs II. He says, other signs or things that we should look out for to prevent this from happening. How do we approach someone who we think are doing inappropriate things with children? Interesting. Approaching that person. Or do you go to the law first? Like, how do you do that?
Well, first of all, I would totally intervene in that behavior, because if I would have known what I know now, I would have said, no, my daughter doesn't want to go over there this morning. No, my daughter doesn't want to sit on your lap. Why are you putting my daughter in the front seat and you're putting your wife in the back seat? I would have been able to speak up, because the one thing about a perpetrator, they don't want to get caught. And confronting is okay. You have to, be bold, and intervene in any behavior that is making your child feel uncomfortable. Now, if it's actual sexual abuse, it has to be reported. We're all mandated reporters, so we must report it. And we must remember that when we make a report about somebody who's done something to our child sexually, we are not making an accusation. We're asking for an investigation to take place. And we have fine agencies doing that investigation. The Department of Child and Family Services, the Bermuda Police Service. And then once they determine that they feel a crime has occurred, then it goes up to the Department of Public Prosecution. So we have 3 fine services determining whether a crime has occurred. And the problem with this issue, though, with child sexual abuse, is sex offenders don't do this in front of other people. There's going to be no evidence. There's going to be, unless it's social media, and then you have something to show, but there's going to be, they're going to do it behind closed doors. And so, it's hard to prove these cases. But mommies and daddies and guardians and caregivers, be that mommy, dad, or daddy bear for your child. You intervene and you let that person know, no matter who that relationship is with. Excuse me, my daughter's saying she doesn't want a hug, or my son doesn't want to sit on your lap, or he's told you 3 times to stop tickling him. Can you please stop tickling? Like, we as parents and caregivers can be the voice for our children, because that's our responsibility. To prevent it, we need to look out for a child's, behavior. We have to, I'd say the first thing in prevention is having a conversation with your child in an age-appropriate way about what they need to do to take care of their bodies. Their bodies are special and private. They don't let anybody touch, view, or take pictures of their private parts, and they don't do that to others. Very important. It goes both ways, right? We respect our spaces, and teach them the difference between a secret and a surprise. Perpetrators, I can't tell you how many stories I've heard, Jamel, of survivors, adult survivors, who said the person told them, keep the secret. It's our secret. Or if you tell, I'm going to kill your mommy. Or if you tell, I'm going to hurt your sister. Or if you tell, you're not going to get on the team. Or if you tell, you're going to have to go. One story I heard, if you tell, your mommy's going to be taken back. You're going to have to move back to Portugal. Your dad's going to lose his job. Or if you tell, he's not going to pay for your boarding school fees anymore. Or if you tell, he's going to have to go to jail. They put this onus on the children. And we as adults,
a heavy burden for a child to carry.
Oh, can you imagine this little child feeling it's like my fault if I tell? I'm going to get in trouble. And many times children don't want people that they actually care about to go to jail. These are perpetrators. They've groomed these children. They've groomed these families. They know what to say to these people. They want to be the best at what they are, because they don't want anybody to suspect what they're doing behind closed doors.
Right. Let's go back to the audience. We've got quite a few questions. Manuela John, she's asking, did the Me Too movement bring attention to child abuse, which had previously gone unreported?
I would say no to that, because Me Too was more about adults, and we just stayed focused, even though it was such an amazing movement. And I'm glad that came out. But, I just focused on child sexual abuse, because the children don't have the voice, and we need to interrupt that behavior. The other thing that I would say is also helping children find that voice. Perpetrators will target children who have low self-esteem, maybe the child that's shy, maybe the child that doesn't have confidence, self-confidence, maybe the child that nobody's taken care of, nobody's watched, their family's in a vulnerable position. And so what we're trying to do is find the voice for children. That's what SCAR's focused on. But I love that Me Too movement. I was, supported it, but it really, for me personally, I didn't see where it helped our cause at all, to be honest.
Got you. A lot of people, when things happen like this, I mean, you see it on social media, and again, until you're in that situation, you just don't know, oh, I'd kill someone, I'd do this, I'd do that. But Mark Arthur C. Phillips asks an interesting question. He says, Mrs. Debi, how did you deal with the various feelings and emotions after you discovered your children were attacked?
There's a lot of emotions. First of all, shock. How did I not know this? Was there something I could have done to prevent this? There's this guilt. Why didn't I see it? How could this happen under my watch as their mother? There was anger. Why are the people not reacting the way they should? I didn't get support from everybody, I can tell you that. That wouldn't happen today because of education. I believe that. And I'm not pointing fingers, but people weren't reacting responsibly. I was actually talked out of prosecuting the person because they honestly thought it would be hard on my kids. No, my children were going to go on that stand, and I was going to make sure in my power, especially because he admitted it, and then he changed his plea to not guilty. It looked like my kids would have to testify. In the end, he changed his plea back to guilty, so they didn't have to go on a witness stand. But my kids were going to go on that witness stand. And I wanted to see that courtroom. And so there was a lot of, and the courtroom before we thought they were going to have to go on the stand. I wanted my children to see what a courtroom looked like. That, that didn't happen years ago. Now it has. We have an amazing witness protection team and that do a great job at the Department of Public Prosecution. But a lot of things weren't happening back in 2004 and 5. So I was angry. But I was also passionate that none of this is right, but we got to get it right. So we got it right by educating. Now 14,000 people have the skills and the tools to prevent child sexual abuse. Organizations are doing the right thing. They're implementing policies. They're doing everything they can to reduce risk. Our schools, our public schools, our Department of Health, our private schools, many youth camps and clubs are doing it. They're getting educated. They're implementing policies that will protect kids, protect the staff that work with their kids. They don't want to put their staff in isolated one-on-one situations. So, they're coming into our room and you will see, and they're doing it every 3 years. The youth serving organizations, a lot of them, depend on the leader of these organizations, will mandate that the people that work with their children will come into a room every 3 years to be reminded, just like CPR. Firemen have to do CPR every 2 years. We recommend SCARs every 3 years. We don't want people to forget this, Jamel, because sexual abuse has not been eradicated. So we want people working with kids to continue to do this. But we also want to get parents in the room to do the training too, because these are their little treasures and they want to do everything they can to make sure they're safe.
And that leads me, well, I'll go to the audience real quickly because it kind of ties in with my next question. But Charles A. Chefs II is asking, how do we make it mandatory for there to be background checks on all adults who are part of an organization with children? And my ties into my last question, which was, are there any laws that could help better protect our children that we should be considering?
Yeah, I think this is a policy within youth serving organizations. And it really depends, like I said, on the leader of that organization who will take child protection seriously. I honestly don't think there's a law that requires every single youth serving organization, which is whether that is I know with the Department of Education, it's a policy. I know with Warwick Academy, Summersfield Academy, BHS, the private schools, Bermuda Institute. I know that that's a policy and I'm assuming they're collecting those certificates and keeping records of who's been certified every 3 years. SCARS certainly has a record of everyone who's been SCARS certified. We can unequivocally tell you, 14,000 names in a database of who's been SCARS certified, but it's up to the youth serving organizations to make that a policy. I would like to see it a law, homeschools everybody who works with kids. Any organization should be mandated to do prevention education. I'm not saying Darkness to Light Stewards of Children is the only one out there. I know a lot of organizations do other ones, and hopefully they will change attitudes and behaviors. Hopefully those other prevention educational tools will dictate policies that they can put in. But I would say to any organization who's going to open their doors to children, go to the SCARS page, scarsbermuda.com website, go to the page that says resources, the title that says resources, and arrow down to resources for youth serving organizations. SCARS has a whole page on sample policies that you can use, sample language that you can use before you even hire somebody or have a volunteer work at your organization with children. There is language that you can put on any type of form that wants to be sure that these people have never been accused or convicted of a crime against children. You don't want them working at your organization. because you want to make sure the children in your organization are safe, and you want to make sure the adults in your organization know what to do to reduce risk, not to put themselves in an isolated one-on-one, and how to recognize signs. The most important thing, Jamel, is that we intervene early, because if trauma can be intervened early, we can start getting help for that child. But if you've got somebody who's had 30 years of trauma, and because we weren't recognizing these signs years ago, that's hard to, I mean, it's possible, but it takes time for an adult who experienced childhood trauma, to receive that healing that they so need from the trauma they experienced when they should not have experienced. Children were not brought into this world to be abused. They were brought into this world to be protected, nurtured, loved, cared for. And, I know parents are busy and they have a lot of, they're juggling so much. But, parents, you say to the people who are watching your children, don't you ever let me find out you've done anything to make my child feel uncomfortable. Yeah. We have every right to say that. Yeah. I am watching, and my child's safety and happiness is the most important thing to me.
Indeed. Debbie, this is great. We'll be, just the audience, this segment is brought to you by the QBE Foundation. We're grateful. We're going to be doing this every other month with SCARS, but we'll actually be doing it again in April as well, because April is it child? Go ahead.
National Child Abuse Prevention Month.
Yeah.
And so please, what can I say, Jamel? Look out for we're going to be doing 30 resources for 30 days. A resource a day will keep a child molester away. That's the name of what we're going to be, of these resources that we're going to be doing on social media. So keep an eye out with some great resources for our parents and guardians as it comes to child sexual abuse. And of course, we'll be on here. We'll be on your show in April. We'll have our radio show next Wednesday. Yeah, so we have things go. We're going to be collaborating with the Coalition for the Protection of Children with a campaign because we educate adults in our community on how to prevent sexual abuse. The Coalition for the Protection of Children, they educate the children on what they need to do to keep them safe. So it's a 360 approach.
That is good to know. So for the audience, if anyone wants to learn more, engage, maybe become SCARS trained and certified, what should they do?
They should go to our website, scarsbermuda.com. They should go to the tab that says Get Trained and click on the red box there and sign up for a 3-hour training. We offer morning, evening, afternoons, weekends. Pick a date that works for them and sign up through the website. If they want to do a private session, there's a box there for that. They have to have 20 participants, but right through our website, scarsbermuda.com, sign up for a training. We have approximately 53,000 adults in this community. We've trained 14. We have a long way to go.
Yeah. Debbie, thank you so much. And as Charles says, thank you to the QBE Foundation for this important conversation. We'll be having these conversations on a regular basis as much as possible to ensure that our community knows the work that each of us can and needs to do to protect our children. Debbie, thank you. We will see you very soon. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jamel.
All righty. Debi Ray-Rivers, folks, please do us a favor. Whatever platform you're on, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, X, Instagram, make sure you give us a like, love, follow, share this conversation with your friends, your family, your colleagues. Make sure everyone you know has access to these important community conversations. We're going to take our final break. We'll be back in 1 minute, 55 seconds with the Daily Play and my final thoughts. Stick with us.